What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback, here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. It is the calm after the storm, I suppose, as we got a really big OQ announcement talking about a lot of the big changes there, as well as some adjustments to the NACL regular season. We welcomed a new team in, and we'll talk about that new roster in just a second. But for now, there's still a lot of time until that first qualifier begins. It's nice that we actually have a time that we're shooting for, a date that we are looking at to be the start of the competitive season. But it's still a little bit of ways away, but still a lot to discuss here on this episode. My name is Grapes, joined alongside Hawk. Hawk, how are you doing today?
Grapes, I'm doing all right. Yeah, we got another announcement, and we got all excited. It's like, oh my god, the season's starting in a month. And so we still got a little ways to go. But honestly, I think a good amount of stuff to talk about this week, regardless, as far as like some reactions based on some of the news. Also, I think this was the most interesting week of CLOL we have had to date so far, which we can sort of get into as well. It's still a good day to be a League of Legends fan, Grapes.
Yeah, a lot of fun collegiate games as we're now getting to that point in the regular season where it's like all the top teams playing against each other, and we're going to start to see potentially, playoff previews, as we approach the end of the Swiss stage, and we start to qualify some teams into the regional playoffs as well. But I feel like this is our last chance to kind of like catch our breath and get ready for the grind that is to come. I went up to Boston this weekend and watched the Super Bowl with some friends, and that might be one of the last weekends that we get for a while. So I'm gonna take it.
I think we might have a couple more weekends left, but yeah, it's getting to that point in the season where everything revolves around League of Legends. And I'm looking forward to it. It's been a long time coming. Grapes, let's dive into the headlines, though, as we finally have some news about the NACL. And it's not just from the article. It did come out in the article. Polestar joins the NACL, but Grapes, as we sort of alluded to might happen, they dropped their roster announcement the same day.
That's right. The Polestar roster was announced. I believe it is the youngest average team so far announced in the Challengers League. They've gone with a bunch of young, new players and a couple of veterans alongside it. Full roster in the top lane is Tenacity. Jungler is Kryra. Mid laner is Toasty Alex, which we alluded to maybe thinking that could happen in terms of a split from Dragonsteel / Maryville in the last episode. AD carry, Spawn, and then support Cryogen, who was the sub on FlyQuest last split. Now, there's a lot to talk about with this roster, but I'm going to come to you here with this hypothetical question. Is Polestar more likely to play in the Tier 1 promotion tournament at the end of the year, or play in a Tier 2 promotion tournament between one of the splits?
It's such an interesting question. First of all, I saw a really great tweet that I think maybe it was from Zav. I really don't know who it's from. I might have just totally miscredited this. That was something along the lines of like Polestar with a team of all 18-year-olds, like League of Legends is healing or something like that. Like, it made me laugh.
I forget who. I did see the tweet. I don't remember.
I don't think it was Zav. If it was, he's involved with Pulse, so it might have been.
He's our GM, yeah. So he built the roster.
Yeah. But either way, it is a great roster, dude. Kryra and Toasty and Cryogen are like these prospects we've been hyping up for a hot sec. Spawn and the Tenacity should hold stuff down. Polestar also already, we kind of knew they were a content team. They put out a great roster announcement video. So that was really cool. My friend Lynn was in it. Hey, Jubes, if you need any Los Angeles-based content creators to help you with any more fun videos like that, I would really love to help you because the first one was really good. It was made by Echon. Echon's great as well. Shout out Echon. But yeah. So I kind of want to get that all out of the way. Like, Polestar clearly putting their money where their mouth is. I think we expected this. It's been an open secret for a while that they're going to join the NACL. As far as the roster itself, Grapes, it is very young, and I do think it's very good. If I'm being honest, the question about like, are they going to be closer to Tier 1 and Tier 3 is really hard because I do thoroughly expect them to just be a middle-of-the-table team. Like, I think this team is going to come in like 4th. You know what I mean?
That's what makes the question interesting.
No, I know. You know? Like, so I guess if I think they're going to come in 4th in a 10-team league, I think they will be closer to Tier 1.
Well, that's the question.
But you know what I mean?
Is like the gap between the top two like higher than maybe the gap towards the bottom of the pack? I think with a younger roster like this, as we said, youngest on average, there's I think 19-year-old Kryra, 18-year-old Toasty, 18-year-old Cryogen on the team. When you have newer players to the space and things like that, specifically Cryogen, who has not played in Tier 2 yet. He was scrimming with the team a little bit with FlyQuest, but really this is his first main opportunity. That can lead to a lot of volatility, and you know that is always a question, especially in a format like this NACL regular season, which is only 9 best-of-3s that you'll play over a couple of weeks. And so it will be – I'm very curious to watch this Pulsar team, I should say, and see where they go, because I think volatility definitely is going to come into play. However, these are players that we have been high on the volatility scale in terms of players that we like, specifically their mid-jungle in Toasty and Kryra. I think both of us have been kind of singing those players' praises ever since last year, sometimes in some cases even beyond, I would say, for Kryra. And they've continued to show that and develop very well. And I think if they take that next step, they can be towards the top of the NACL. So I think I agree with you. They're going to probably have a better chance at being towards the top. And I think the second reason on top of that is because with a team like Nightmare dropping out, the 3 other teams that are coming in might be a little bit weaker. There might be a little bit less competition.
That's really funny. Yeah, like, I mean, man, Kryra getting a starting NACL spot, I think, is something we have been wanting for a really long time. Like, I feel like him getting a starting NACL spot is on the same tier of, like, expectation as Surdy getting a starting LTA spot. We're like, this player could have been in the league last year. You know what I mean? So
at least in our heads, you know,
in a lot of people's eyes,
we thought about
ball knowers knew this, but unfortunately, NACL GMs not always ball knowers. So it's just how it is. You know what I mean? And obviously CCG picked him up at the end of the year, and he did pretty well. But yeah, I think this has been a long time coming. My big issue with this roster, I guess, if like to temper expectations, like you said, volatility. I do think Tenacity kind of needs to have a bounce back year if this team is going to be a real contender. He was also a bit of a flipper in 2024. I'm not going to lie. And I think he needs to not be that, because I'm expecting mid lane to be very volatile. And if both solo lanes are volatile with a jungler that, to Kryra's credit, is actually very good at playing in volatile games. He creates volatility in a way that I don't think tier 3 junglers really understand how to do it from a nuanced perspective very much. It's just like fight all the time, right? But Kryra knows how to kind of manage that. I think bot lane can be fairly consistent with Spawn, but I think Tenacity needs to have a bit of a bounce back, and I think we've seen Spawn's ceiling as well, and it's just not that high. Like, he's a good player, don't get me wrong, but I think that more for me is like maybe why they won't be a championship contender. It's not even so much of like, oh, Toasty might have a sophomore slump, which is possible, or Cryogen just aren't built for that. But yeah, I think they're going to be a mid-table team. I'd be really surprised if they flamed out and were in promotion. But I'd also be equally surprised if they beat Dragonsteel. I'll just be honest.
Yeah, I agree with your point as like specifically for Tenacity, because his, you know, he came back from like a split off, I guess.
Right,
after
like he was good. He had some great games.
He was okay. But yeah, I think specifically towards the summer split, though, it looked like he was actually not really one of the top performing bot laners or top laners after being like the best top lane in Academy for so many years in 2022 and 2021. Did not make an all-pro team either split, I believe. So that kind of goes to show like the dip in his particular level of play compared to the rest of the pack. I think in terms of Spawn, though, like as well, I feel like for a team with like a lot of rookies, it is nice to have some sort of solid.
Oh, he's a great player to have on
this
roster.
And so having somebody like
I didn't
him,
want to flame him or anything.
It's the classic developmental team strategy that we always talk about. Just some veterans with some young players.
I just don't think Spawn is necessarily a championship winning AD carry if like that's what we're looking at as a Pulsar roster. I think he's amazing for this team though. I think he's a great veteran presence to have, and I do think he's very good. I think he will keep them like Spawn's the type of player that can keep you out of relegation, you know? So yeah, I think he'll be great. I think he's for developing alongside Cryogen. I think my biggest thing is like even if Tenacity and Toasty are all pro solo lanes, I just don't know if this team has the sauce to like really be a championship contender. And again, I see them being like 4th or 5th, and there's no shame in that. That would be fantastic for this team.
Okay, well here's a little fun game before we move on. There's 5 total announced teams so far. Half the league has currently been announced. That's Luminosity, Maryville, Blue Otter, Pulsar, and Winthrop. Where do you put them? Where do you put this Pulsar roster in that group of 5?
3rd. I think they're stronger than
Higher than
Winthrop
Blue Otter.
and Blue Otter.
Okay. Interesting. I think I'm with you, although maybe at the start of the split I would give it to Blue Otter, maybe just because of that existing synergy. But
yeah, we'll see. I'm also like curious like how hot of a start Blue Otter will have because they have that existing synergy. But like you never know, like things can change between splits, metas can change. Like we'll see how much they hit the ground running.
Yeah, I do think that those two teams specifically are going to be really fun, specifically because of the young stars that are both on both of those teams, and a lot of room to grow for those players.
To
me, on those rosters.
That makes up like the middle of the pack right now. You know what I mean? Like Blue Otter and Pulse with Dragonsteel and Luminosity being clear favorites. I do unfortunately think Winthrop will be a little bit weaker.
And then we'll see like the other three teams come in, and then we're still waiting on CCG and Supernova, of course. So almost there in terms of fully announcing, but for now, another good team to talk about there in Pulse Star. Let's transition over to the collegiate landscape for a bit. As you said, Hawk, every week gets more and more exciting in the Swiss regular season, and that came to a fruition this week. We'll talk about some of the matchups in the Swiss stage a little bit later, but for now, let's focus on a conference that is not playing in Swiss. That is the NECC, who have just completed some really high-quality matchups over the last 3 weeks. It was Ole Miss losing to Winthrop in week 1, then Winthrop losing to Fisher in week 2, and then Fisher losing to Ole Miss in week 3, completing, Hawk, what I think you called a circle of suck between these three teams at the top of the conference that a lot of us were expecting to be very, very good. This is a common sports term, but you were the one who publicly.
Also, so many people were like, "Hawk, it's a triangle." I know. Okay, it's not. I didn't invent. I did not invent the term.
I get you.
Circle of suck. I just need to make that clear. I do not think the teams suck. I love them.
It is a way that
it's from college basketball and college football. Okay.
Yeah. Regardless, each of these teams is 1-1 against each other. Who's the best?
Oh man, yeah, dude. This tweet did pretty well for me. This was a fun tweet. If you want to hear more about CLOL, subscribe to our Patreon and watch CLOL Office Hours with Grapes. Also, like, subscribe, join the Discord, all that. We never said that earlier. Anyway, but regardless.
We're bad YouTubers.
Yeah, we are bad YouTubers. No wonder we're struggling. But regardless, NECC now has a circle of suck wherein Winthrop started the season by 2-1ing Ole Miss. Then they got 2-0'd by Fisher. And then just this past week, Ole Miss 2-0'd Fisher. So they have made a little triangle in which each team has beaten the other. Which team in the best? Man, this is a really hard answer. Because I do think all three of these teams are probably like top 6 in the nation. With Fisher just being the main question mark because we've just seen less tape, right? Like Ole Miss and Winthrop are like mostly the same roster we know them as and are going to be about the same caliber, which is top 5 in the nation. But Fisher, like, we'll see, right? It's just harder to say. They did have a really big win over Winthrop. Word on the street is that Winthrop had the flu last week, so how much did that play in? Hard to say. It was pretty sloppy against Ole Miss, though, I will be honest. But Ole Miss weirdly overcommits to shit all the time. I think all of that to say is I think Fisher is probably the weakest of the three, but still a top 10 team at the very least in the nation. And then you have Ole Miss and Winthrop, who are probably 3 and 4. I think I'm going to give the nod to Ole Miss, but it's really hard for me to say.
Yeah.
I just think
tough.
They have. Sorry, I just keep rambling. I just think they have the best bottom lane in CLOL, and I think that is hard to overstate.
Definitely true. I do think now though, mobility and only 35 can start to sneak up there a little bit too.
They did in their series.
Yeah, and I think mobility specifically has been playing great League of Legends.
Yeah.
I also want to throw a bone to Sajed and Zyko over there as well because we haven't seen much of them play together, but in terms of star power, those are another 2 good players there. But
good bottom lanes.
Shogo Rhino, I feel like we haven't seen like I didn't get the chance to watch fully the Ole Miss versus Fisher series. It seemed like
I only saw
was
game 2.
A little bit sloppy in game number 2, but overall game 1 was pretty clean. And then I feel like for Fisher it was the same thing against Winthrop, where like they had some sloppy moments, but in general, I think all things considered, technically their win over Winthrop was actually like the most dominant out of the 3 matches that had.
Yeah.
Again, I think some context in just terms of the players, I think being really sick that week and also really not having time to scrim for most of that week as well. Definitely, I think played a role. And I think because of that, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. This is a little bit of a spoiler for our poll that comes out later this week. But I think I actually have Winthrop as the best of these three. I give them just a little bit over Ole Miss. I love
so hard.
I enjoy head to head as like a tiebreaker when I really think it's close. And in the moments that mattered most, Ole Miss did not win.
But Grapes, the circle of suck invalidates the head to head. That's the point of the circle.
That is true. Although I think I'm giving bonus points, or I'm taking less points, I think, away from Winthrop because of how because of the circumstances around their series versus Fisher. At least that's how I'm like kind of viewing this. In terms of Fisher, I agree, still around top 10. It's just hard to really know where they're at because of the lack of tape. I think their jungler Brunes was the player that impressed me the most when looking around some of the tape and stuff that we do have of them. But I think we just need to see more of this squad overall before we make like a certain judgment on them.
To just give my take on Fisher, because I definitely think Grapes, this is the team we've talked about the least on the show, and like it would be good to generate some hype for them. This team is very mechanically talented. Like they were making some individual outplays basically everywhere except for bottom lane against Ole Miss, where they kind of got ran, but that's just the Shogo Rhino experience, right? But like their top side was really playing well. Their macro and decision making was not very good in my opinion. No, they did a good job of playing on side waves and trading for turrets, but like the way they approached fights did not impress me. So I think they have some room to grow there, but like they're clearly very good players, which I think at the very least, like again, keeps them in the conversation as far as like who's going to be the best in CLOL. So I'm interested to see how they grow. Like can Coach Drake turn them into the team that they need to be? I think is a big question, right? Like getting that win over Winthrop is great. So I'll throw that little nugget in there. Yeah, it's hard. I think I'm going to give the nod to Ole Miss right now. I think my biggest knock against them, and I don't mean this to be toxic or anything, I worry that Asila is a liability against the top teams in the nation. I just don't think he stacks up to the caliber of mid laners like Wayne A, who had a great series for Fisher, or, you have Spyrax, you have,
Bradley,
right? Thank you. I knew I was forgetting someone. Like, I think I'm just a little concerned for him specifically against that, like, top echelon. I think against everybody else, he's going to be perfectly fine. And his team fighting is really good. It's just like laning phase. He's been falling behind. So that's my one nervousness. But I think overall, Ole Miss has the potential to be a more complete team. So, yeah, we'll see.
It does remind me, weak in lane, they're good at team fighting. Kind of reminds us of another certain Ole Miss mid laner. Yeah, so,
dude, if he can become the player that like Marty became for Ole Miss, they will be fine. Like, so I just want to put that.
And I think from all we've heard from like our conversations with different people in the space is that they really think this kid is gonna.
Oh yeah, good. And Asila has been working very hard from what we've heard as well, which is like that's what I want to see from a player. You know what I mean? Because you don't have to be amazing now. You just need to be amazing come May. And he can do that.
Yeah. And I feel like from what we've heard about like how good people feel about him, I'm hopeful that can work out for them. Right now I just have Winthrop because of the head-to-head and because of I'm maybe giving him a little bit of a pass on the Fisher series, but it's definitely very close, and we'll get to talk about that more a little bit later on throughout the season. Right now for those guys, it's just don't screw up until you get to play each other again in the playoffs, and Northwood as well. Northwood's sitting around there as well.
Dude, Northwood better get to play one or two of these teams in the playoffs, man. Otherwise, like, data on them is cooked.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the seeding works there, but I think they will probably play against like the fourth place team in that conference first, and then some other combination after.
I'm just hoping they
match it up.
Like have someone on their side of the bracket for like semifinals, so that way we can see them play in semis, and then maybe they win, and we see them in grands.
It should definitely be Northwood playing one of those three teams in at least the semifinals.
Right. And it would be great to see them beat one of those teams, so we can see them play another one.
That is true. I mean, they're kind of like right in the mix of all that right now, but it's hard to talk about them in the context because we haven't seen them play against each other.
Because just okay, we're taking a long time in these first two headlines, but common expectation is that there is a clear top 6 in the nation, which is Maryville, UST, Winthrop, ISU, Ole Miss, Fisher, and Northwood. That was 7 teams.
That was 17.
Common consensus that those are the top 7 teams in the nation, and then you have a bit of a drop off before 8. Whether or not that's true, obviously up for debate. I'm sure St. Clair and Western have something to say about that, but that is common expectation. Winthrop is just the team that we know the least about right now. Same with ISU, because we've not seen them play anyone good. So we want to see more from them. Grapes, we should probably move on to headline 3, though.
Last thing I want to say about that. In that circle of suck, currently Ole Miss sits in first place just because of game record, because they took a game in their only loss. As we finish up the regular season, just got to keep an eye on that. If any of Ole Miss, Fisher, or Winthrop drop a game to any of these other teams, that could be really big in terms of seeding. But right now, if all things kind of stay the same and all the teams 2-0 like they're expected to, Ole Miss will end in first place. Let's move on to our next headline, though. As speaking of CLOL, the Open Qualifier coming up in a couple of weeks opens up a lot of opportunities for these CLOL teams. As we've seen, there's already 2 squads participating in the in the NACL that are CLOL squads, that being Maryville and Winthrop. They have been given a special exception from Riot to allow them to enter the space as a business to allow their players to compete. And that is something something that a lot of the other organizations that are trying to make it into the NACL might not have. And so, in my opinion, this is the greatest time ever for all CLOL teams in this expanded bracket to enter into the OQs and give it a shot. Out of, we have our usual suspects here. I'm sure UCI, St. Clair are going to be submitting some team talk, but out of the squads that aren't necessarily the expected CLOL teams to play in OQs, is there anyone that you are hoping to get to look at?
Yeah. Just as far as what you say by expected grapes, ISU, they always enter spring OQs. They're going to be there. That's the rumor, which is awesome, by the way. I think they should be actually pretty competitive. I know we were just talking about Northwood and not having tape on them. I don't think Will or Cozy have been rumored to teams. Instinct has been, but it's a little dicey. That would be a pretty cool OQ team if Northwood was able to play there. But dude, I would love to see more of these like mid-tier teams. I'm looking at like the MEC teams are always great to see whenever they play in OQs. Weber State, I think they said on Twitter actually in response to
they commented on our YouTube video.
Yeah,
they're gonna be playing.
Thank you. It was a comment. Leave a comment if you want to see a team playing OQs. But yeah, I think Weber State would be great to see. I don't know, Grapes. Do you have any others in mind?
So I have one that's like a team of players that like have some players, some OQ experience, and then some players that maybe don't have as much OQ experience. The first one is Converse. I would love to see this Converse team give it a whirl for fun. Devin and Phantom, together have played in different OQs in the past couple of splits. But maybe just get some reps with your college team. And I think that Ego and Painshell and Zav are all very solid players that can allow for that team to get to be competitive, I should say, like in the Open Qualifier. And the biggest thing for them is that they don't get a lot of good competition in the Peach Belt, so playing in the Open Qualifier would be a great way for them to get more stage games against teams that might be more similar in skill to the teams that they would play later on in terms of CLOL. The second team that I have in mind is University of Toronto. Now, they just dropped to UTM 2-0. Honestly, that's another team that I'd love to see in the OQs, although players like AB and Munchie, I would expect to see regardless. But for Toronto specifically, there are a bunch of really high ELO players. They're all GM plus on their roster, but it seems like the only time we ever see those guys play is in CLOL, during the CLOL season. Now that this opportunity has opened up, I think this would be a really good way to add a little bit more notability and a little bit more credibility to that team in the East Conference.
I mean, I'm even going to do you one better. Probably closest to Toronto, where it's like a team of unknowns. Like, dude, I would love to see a team like Minnesota, play in the OQs. Now that we have this expanded OQ with 64 teams as opposed to 32, University of Minnesota, they might not get accepted into a regular OQ, but even though they're not going to qualify for the NACL, I think it'd be really cool for a team of 5 just sort of masters players to to like that have experience playing together, see how they do, get some experience. They just 2-0'd Bethany. Massive bombshell of an upset in the North Conference this past weekend. I think like, dude, a team like that would be sick. So like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking of like all those just like random teams that we don't talk about as much that might be outside of our CLOL Hub top 25, but more than capable.
If your goal if your goal is to get onto the CLOL top 25 rankings and you don't play any and you're in like a partner conference or something, like doing well in the OQs would definitely help you there. I mean, like Converse has.
I know it's a controversial take amongst the CLOL Hub committee, but if I see more tape on you, I'm more likely to like you.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
And hey, even for a team like Fisher, I know that they are like, a lot of imports and things like that, but I think being a part of the collegiate program might give you some exceptions. There's also just the fact that you are playing under the regular NA Tier 1 import rules as well. I don't know exactly.
I'm pretty sure if they played under the Fisher College banner, they could play.
Yeah. Like if that team goes and does well in OQs, that would definitely help their case as well. It's just more tape or more games against opponents that we are familiar with, and that I think all helps. So yeah, this is our call to action. If you're a collegiate team that wants a little bit extra practice and hey, even the chance to make the miracle run to play in the NACL, you should definitely sign your team up for the OQ. I know that it might interfere a little bit with the schedule, but you can, there's probably ways to work around that. So, just the fact that everything's on weekends, man. Maybe it's a good thing that NACL is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday now. In terms of that, just the fact that there's not like games all the time, maybe.
Right. Yeah. I got
maybe
you.
Maybe that's topic for another day. But as we can move on to our next headline, which is actually our first ever Patreon user suggestion. So another perk to our Patreon page if you subscribe using a $5.
Technically, our first headline was this, by the way. Shout out Ferris, who suggested a headline we were already going to talk about. But anyway.
Yeah, but every week from now on, what we're going to do is poll all of our members on Patreon and ask them if they have any headlines, and we will pick the one that we want to answer the most, and that'll be a topic that we discuss on the show. So we want to shout out Samikin, the mid laner for Blue Water, also a loyal NACL Salty Runback patron, who asked the question about Fearless Draft. I want to get his exact wording just so we know for sure what this looks like, but let's read this here right now. Let me open this up. So he wants to hear our opinion on the new full Fearless format, which is where games 4 and 5 have all 10 bans. Now we hit on it like a tad in the announcement video, but we didn't really dive into it, I guess. And then the second part of the question is talking about any pocket picks or any unique picks that we'd like to see specifically from the LTA North and South players once the series start going to best of 5s. I think it's only the finals here in the Americas. I could be wrong on that.
It's like a best of 3 single elim bracket. Yeah.
Yeah. But especially, I think, as we go forward, seeing these teams potentially in like the first stand tournament where they'll be playing a lot more best of 5s. All cool questions here. So thank you, Samikin. But let's talk about Fearless Draft here for a little bit.
I love this question because Samikin acknowledged LTA South. He said, "I just want to hear more about LTA South," and I love it because I love LTA South. I will be honest, I've watched absolutely 0 games this year, but I casted CBLOL for 2 years, so I like to think I know a thing or two. I'm really interested as well to see like how games 4 and 5 look in this full Fearless format. I've not watched LPL like you have, Grapes, so I'm not as familiar. I know that it can get pretty degenerate once you kind of get into it. But it looks like it's been fun. As far as like, I don't even know what angle I want to attack. I guess to give my take on like the format as a whole, I think it's interesting. I think it'll be fun. We've had this sort of conversation before. Pocket picks that I expect to get pulled out are very hard for me to say because there are certain players that have certain pocket picks. I think of Bjergsen and Zillion is a great example of like that would have been a Fearless Draft killer, man. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, game 5, he's already pulling that shit out. Oh, but like it's player dependent, but then there's also sometimes meta dependent, right? Some pocket picks are just specific answers to things that appear in the meta. Grapes, I'm going to toss it over to you because I'll let you talk about LTA North, and then I'll talk about LTA South in a sec.
Yeah, and also as somebody who's watched a good chunk of LPL, we've only had, I think, 1 or 2 full 5-game series. I think one just happened the other day between JDG and Weibo. But honestly, like when I first realized that like I didn't even realize that the format was changing from like the original like NACL like style of things where bans get dropped, because it seemed just very natural going into games 4 and 5. It seemed like there weren't any like, it wasn't a situation where like, oh, these are like insane crazy picks, like man, these guys are like grasping and clawing at potential solutions. Like we got like a Pantheon jungle in game 5 in one of the series. We got like there's a lot of things that are kind of in the meta, but maybe you get less desirable matchups and things like that. It also opens up for more unique counter picks overall. I think also specifically because the LPL is just generally a high quality league, you're going to see less of the like major effects on like more and more champions being taken away. So I'm interested to see how it works out in North America. I'm don't really think that there's too many players that like are super like that have super small champion pools. Like you could target somebody like Sniper maybe, but he even has like kind of grown his pool out a little bit as he's
you can get rid of all of the Korean top laners from Thanatos at least.
That's true.
Like Gnar,
like
Renekton.
Some of the make him play like put him against Whippo and it might go a little crazy. In terms of
dude, Surdy would have been
picks.
so fun to see in a full Fearless best of 5. By the way, him and Whippo playing like Camille Garen against each other, that was hype.
Yeah, I mean Whippo, we've seen his tier list. Like he says he's willing to play things like Karma and Lulu top lane. So I'm hoping to see maybe some of that.
He is
if we get
a bit of a terrorist in the pick and ban, but like I respect it, as he should be. By the way,
Whippo is pretty self-explanatory. But the two that I want to talk about, especially specifically from the north, Inspired on the Nunu, which is always like since he whipped it out, like I think in LCS earlier, and then again during Worlds, it's always in the back of my mind whenever he's playing something. And then also maybe a little bit more of a sleeper at this point, although back in the day maybe it wasn't. Aurelion Sol for APA. I mean, when we saw Fearless Draft in the qualifiers, Aurelion Sol was like a very, very powerful pick, specifically for Bradley, who was able to whip it out multiple times and have just incredible effects on it.
Yeah, you get rid of things like Galio that can just sit on it.
Yeah, and I think as you get later into the games, you can ban away you can ban away assassins, ban away like things that can eat up a lot of that early game damage, and maybe allow for a little bit more of a higher scaling comp. So those are the two players that I might have my eyes on as we head down to Sao Paulo.
That's an interesting pick. I actually had not thought too much about the ASOL. I do think it's funny when people say like APA has a small champion pool. I think he's going to struggle in Fearless because I feel like his little niche champions are actually really good Fearless champions because he can always fall back on them when other people might not have something. All right, Grapes. I'm going to talk about LTA South because I'm so excited. First of all, the top two teams out of the LTA South are the LATAM representatives, which
I know
was awesome. Not expected at all. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know as much about those teams and players. The only two Brazilian players on those two teams are Pro Delta and Scary. I don't have too much to say about Scary. Pro Delta, I do think is the best support in Brazil now that Seos, is theoretically coming to North America at some point. So
eventually.
Yeah. So Pro Delta is that guy. I do think he can play anything. So I think that's someone to watch out for just as far as being able to play anything. You also have Root, who I think can play absolutely anything at the AD carry position. He's got a pocket Sivir. His Sivir was always really good in Brazil that I think he could definitely pull out in a best of 5. You have Tinones, who has Orianna and Swain that you can literally never go wrong with. And I think most teams are not playing Orianna right now, right? So that's like kind of a pocket pick.
Some Nocturne Ori maybe thrown out there?
Yeah, that was a staple for Loud for a long time. I'm sure, even though they don't have Croc for the Croc turn anymore, I think Wiz can probably play that. But his Swain was traditionally a counterpick to Ahri, so I would not be surprised to see that one come out in a Fearless setting. You can also play it into like other like lower damage mages, was sort of where Tinones would look for that sort of angle. Robo Olaf is a big one to look out for. Titan Draven, also a player that can just kind of play anything, so I think he'd be a resource in a best of 5. For Pain Gaming, I do think Dinkato is a bit of a liability. That guy can only play like 4 champions. Yeah, those are my thoughts. So
I think
if that was of interest to anyone, I guess like few players with some pocket picks, few players that can play anything.
80 carries.
Yeah.
Where
I definitely think Root and Titan are assets in the Fearless format. I think a player like Dean Cato, possibly a liability. Honestly, all 3 junglers that are either Brazilian or Wiz is Korean, but he played in the CLOL. All 3 of them, I don't know what they're going to play once like all of the regular like facilitator junglers are gone, because we never see them play them or like anything else. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I did learn a little bit right there about the LTA South. So thank you very much. I do think that Swain is another just very strong champion in general on this current patch. It's very annoying for me to play it against in solo queue. I know Whippo has been whipping it out in some of the stream scrims that happened between FlyQuest and C9. Like, that champion seems very, very strong at the moment.
Yeah.
So either in mid or top.
And to be clear,
or even support.
Robo is the LTA South's Whippo. So
okay,
he might have more unhinged picks beside Olaf, but we'll see.
All things to look forward to. And you know, maybe those champions will just continuously ban, because in Game 5 of Fearless, no more bans. So another interesting loophole to throw this way. So thank you very much to Samikin.
Yeah.
If you want to have one of your questions as one of our headlines, make sure to subscribe using the link below and join our Discord server.
And keep
you get a special little tag.
LTA South questions, so that way we can confuse grapes.
Well, yeah. Maybe once LTA South Tier 2 comes in to play, then we can start talking about that too.
I will be a lot less useful for that. I'm going to be honest with you, but
yeah. All right, let's
shout out the Patreons in the Discord. Do all that stuff.
Yes. Wrap things up here with our last headline, specifically talking about another big event that happened this weekend that was not League of Legends related, and that was the Super Bowl, the premier sporting event in the United States. A lot of us football fans got some catharsis out, I guess, as we watched the Kansas City Chiefs finally get destroyed by the Philadelphia Eagles. Congratulations to the Eagles and their great season. But I think the biggest story throughout the Super Bowl was maybe the halftime show, where Kendrick Lamar came out and just gave the absolute premier hater performance as he criticized both the U.S. government or the American values and the American system that we've grown up in our whole lives, and also, you know, his good old-fashioned foe in Drake. That Not Like Us has become such a big diss track, Hawk. Which NACL player would you like to see drop a diss track?
Grapes, how do you feel knowing you, to date, have dropped the biggest rap in NA amateur history?
Yeah, shout out Desirek with the DK. We dropped a couple bangers, honestly. You know, everyone remembers the first one, but we got a couple other ones thrown in there as well. There's a DK Crew sequel that we played during the promotion tournament, or during Proving Grounds, and then. But
that was the biggest one. Was the DK
everyone
rap.
Remembers the DK.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers the classics. I would love to be defeated. I would love to be overtaken by somebody.
That sounds like a challenge, dude. That Kendrick halftime show was so awesome. I feel like no Super Bowl halftime show has ever tried to send a message other than some like weird, contrived, patriotic togetherness message. And Kendrick completely subverted that, which I thought was one of the coolest things ever that I've seen in a halftime show. It was super cool. I would love to see an NACL player drop a diss track of that caliber. I will say, dude, I don't like know how else to say this. I feel like the NACL is so white. You know what I mean? I'm not sure who's gonna be the one to drop the track. I don't know. Like, dude, yeah, I don't know. Like that feels like just something. Like I needed to get the elephant out of the room there. You know what I mean?
I think the bigger thing, there's just not a lot of beef.
There's not a lot of beef. I feel like it, dude. Like the first one to drop a diss track would be like Mobility on Shogo.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, we might have to go the CLOL angle here.
Yeah.
They have their back and forths. We all love to watch it as well.
It would have been
I'm trying
Marty.
to think of anybody else. Yeah, if Marty would have done it. Is there anybody else in the league that like you could see dropping one?
Like, dude,
maybe hot take.
I just don't see anyone in the NACL rapping.
In terms of which org would like force their players to do something, it would definitely be Blue Water. I would think. I think Brizzy would like be very down to like
who
force
on
the
that
players
team.
To.
Samikin's too nice. Like
it would all be like fake roasting and more being nice to everybody. We're too nice here.
Okay, music live up to the name.
Yeah, I don't know who he's beef with.
I'm
though.
kind of really grasping at straws here. I feel like Pulse Star could drop a rap at some point. Like the Toasty Alex, he could come out with something. Tenacity.
He also strikes me as just such a nice guy. I could see Tenacity doing it if he has beef with somebody.
Toasty's a really nice kid.
It's got to be like two friends who like kind of are friends, but then like also like are very competitive within each other. Is there anybody in CLOL that we could see this happening to?
Like,
I think losing Slew hurts. They had a lot of personalities on that team. I could see Aaron dropping something.
Like, what if like Reppy just like dropped something?
RBM. Well,
RBM.
He's not playing anymore.
That would be a pretty good candidate. I'm not gonna lie. If RBM was still around, that RBM, if you're listening, I would love to see a diss track. I'm not gonna lie.
He just comes out of nowhere, not playing CLOL the whole season, and then right when they play like, I don't know, in the NECC finals or something, just like starts shitting all over Ole Miss or something like that. That'd be great.
Oh my god, that would be pretty good.
I think we've determined though it has to be from CLOL.
I think it has to be. I don't think there's enough beef in the NACL, dude. Like, everyone's very supportive, which it's a good thing, by the way. We should be supportive,
very good
but
thing.
like, yeah.
I guess some things will just have to stay in traditional sports, I suppose. As that's gonna do it here for
I don't know,
our episode.
I will say a lot of the traditional sports fans are not very happy about Kendrick in his halftime show.
I think we're opening up
the stereotypical NACL NFL fan. I've seen a lot of discourse, but
there's a can of worms.
That's
I
a
don't know
can
if
of
we should be
worms.
getting into
Yeah,
right now. Maybe for shooting assault.
Honestly,
we gotta drop one of those.
That's a great idea. Regardless,
the VOD reviewing the halftime show, just like getting really, really deep into it.
Dude, league casters react to Kendrick's halftime show is definitely a content idea.
God, I think we're too white for that too.
We are a little too white for that.
I can say that as we wrap up our headlines for this episode. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on, I believe, Thursday with a new part 2. I know we've had to delay the last couple of episodes, which were for specific reasons. One was because of Surdy, and then the other one was because the announcement
it's all Surdy's fault
on Friday. Or it was just scheduling that came up with us and Surdy, and then the announcement coming up. But the typical cadence, at least until the start of the NACL season, will be every Tuesday and Thursday with our Patreon content also coming out throughout the week. So make sure you click on that using the link below, and we'll see you on Thursday as well.
Yeah. Join our Discord. Check us out on social media everywhere that you can at Salty Runback NA. Follow myself and Grapes as well at Hawkcasts at Speedy Grapes. If you think that the Kendrick halftime show is bad, take what we said with a grain of salt, but you're also wrong. I've been Hawk. That's been Grapes. Have a good one, everyone.